What happens when a booking mistake puts two strangers in the same room on a remote Greek island? Grace came to the writing retreat for solitude. Emma came for sun and sea. This is the story of one summer and one secret they didn't mean to share. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thanks so much for watching. The room was smaller than advertised. Grace stood frozen in the doorway, her bag still dangling from one shoulder as she took in the single bed, the low ceiling fan spinning with the rhythm of a lazy island afternoon, and the pair of sandals already kicked haphazardly under the woven bench. A woman stood by the open window, tan legs bare beneath loose white shorts, a cotton tank barely brushing the curve of her hips. Her hair was messy in the deliberate way that made Grace's stomach tighten, waves catching the sun, shoulder length, careless. The kind of woman who left a room without ever fully leaving it. "Grace, right?" the woman asked, glancing over her shoulder. Hazel eyes. A voice like honey left too long in the sun. "Guess we're bunkmates." "Apparently." Grace forced a polite smile and stepped inside, trying to ignore the fact that the room was holding its breath. She was too, trying not to wrinkle under the weight of her linen dress or the dampness clinging to her lower back. She adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat. "They said I'd have my own." "Same. But the organizer swears it's temporary. Something about a booking glitch." The woman held out her hand. "Emma." Grace hesitated, then shook it. Emma's palm was warm, fingers rough with calluses, and she held on a beat too long. Grace didn't mind. There was only one key. They passed it between them awkwardly, like a secret neither was ready to keep. The hours blurred. Grace pretended to unpack. Emma stripped down to a bikini and announced she was going for a swim. Grace said she had a migraine and curled up with a book she didn't read. By sunset, Emma returned dripping wet, towel slung low on her hips, hair dark with salt. She smelled like sea and sun, and she was humming under her breath. Not a melody, just something idle and low. Grace sat up a little too quickly. "You should come next time," Emma said, pulling on a dry shirt without bothering with the buttons. "There's a cove down the path. No one's ever there. Water's like silk." Grace looked away. "I don't swim." Emma raised an eyebrow but didn't press. She just shrugged and stretched, the move effortless and slow, like her body hadn't forgotten how to take up space. Grace tried not to stare, tried not to wonder what it would be like to press her hand against that strip of skin just above the waistband of Emma's shorts. That night, the bed was too narrow for pretense. Grace lay rigid on one side, facing the wall, heat sticking to the back of her neck. Emma moved naturally, one leg hooked over the sheet, breathing deep, unbothered. Her arm brushed Grace's hip once, by accident, surely, but she didn't move it for several long, unbearable seconds. Then she did. "Sorry," she mumbled, voice thick with sleep. Grace didn't answer. Her pulse was too loud, her thighs too warm. She had the ridiculous urge to roll over, to press the length of her body against Emma's, to see what would happen if she just stopped pretending to be unaffected. Instead, she closed her eyes and counted to 100, twice. The next morning, the retreat began in earnest. Grace wore her neat, neutral clothes and kept her chin up through introductions, critiques, and coffee breaks. Emma, in contrast, strolled into the shared terrace space barefoot, her camera slung around her neck, a red string bracelet wrapped twice around her wrist. She laughed easily. She listened well. Grace hated how much she noticed the way Emma touched people when she spoke to them. A hand to the elbow, a brief graze to the back. Not flirtation, just connection. That night, they lay in bed again. But this time, Emma was on her side, facing Grace. "You're not as uptight as you pretend to be," she said in the dark. Grace exhaled slowly. "You're not as carefree as you want people to think." Emma chuckled. Fair! The silence wasn't awkward. It was warm, close, electric. A slow fuse burning between them. Emma's fingers brushed Grace's wrist, lightly at first. A test. Grace turned her palm upward. Emma didn't speak. She just let her fingers move along the inside of Grace's arm, slow and deliberate, mapping veins and goosebumps like Braille. When she finally leaned in, it wasn't a sudden decision. It felt inevitable. Her lips found the edge of Grace's mouth, soft, asking. Grace didn't hesitate. She shifted closer, breathing against Emma's cheek as she kissed her back, gently at first, then more certain. Emma's hand slid to Grace's hip, pulling her closer until their legs tangled beneath the sheet. The kiss deepened, but it didn't rush. It lingered, warm, steady, lips parting with a sigh. Emma's tongue moved with careful rhythm, not demanding, just exploring. Grace answered with a soft noise she didn't mean to make. Emma smiled into the kiss. Still got that migraine? Shut up, Grace whispered, tugging her closer. They didn't go further, not that night, but their bodies pressed together in that narrow bed, sweat slick and humming, breath shared in the dark. Emma's hand found the small of Grace's back, splayed wide and steady, like she didn't plan on letting go. Grace fell asleep with Emma's lips brushing her shoulder, and her heart drumming in places she didn't know could be touched. Grace woke before the sun. The sky outside their single window was pale and silent, just starting to glow with the hush of early morning light. Emma was still asleep, one arm slung over Grace's waist, breathing slow and deep against the back of her neck. She didn't move. Not because she was afraid, but because she didn't want to risk ending it. The press of Emma's body behind her was too perfect. Her bare thigh nestled between Grace's legs, skin warm and smooth, breath soft enough to stir the fine hairs at her nape. Something had shifted. The air was charged in a new way, and it wasn't just the kiss. Emma had touched her like she already knew the shape of her, like her hands had been waiting to explore. Not greedy, but not shy either. Just certain. Grace's heartbeat picked up again, embarrassingly fast. Emma stirred. Her voice was rough with sleep. You always lie that still? I was trying not to wake you. You didn't. Emma's hand moved slightly on Grace's stomach, fingers splaying lower. Not quite daring, but deliberate. She pressed a kiss to Grace's shoulder, then another just below her ear, and Grace's breath hitched. I wasn't dreaming, was I? Emma said. No. Emma smiled against her skin. Good. They didn't get up for another hour. When they did, it was clumsy in the way new closeness always is. Brushing teeth side by side in the narrow bathroom, trying not to look too long in the mirror at how they fit there together, barefoot and rumpled, and not pretending anymore. Grace pulled on a dress that clung too much in the humidity and tried to keep her voice casual. Are we going to talk about it? Emma was brushing sand from a camera lens. Talk about what? Grace rolled her eyes. Okay. Emma looked up. I'm kidding. Kind of. She stepped closer and slid her hand to the back of Grace's neck. We can talk, or we can go for a swim. I told you I don't. I'll teach you. Grace hesitated. Emma leaned in, voice low. It's shallow where I go. You won't drown unless you plan to. Grace narrowed her eyes, but her pulse betrayed her. Fine. The cove was hidden behind a trail of hot stone and wild rosemary. They passed 2 goats and a sleepy tabby cat stretched out on a windowsill before the path opened up to an arch of sand, soft and untouched. No one else was there. The sea was a muted turquoise, calm and impossibly clear. Emma stripped to her bikini without hesitation. Grace, more slowly, unbuttoned her cover-up to reveal a black one-piece with thin straps and a hesitant curve at the hip. Emma stared a moment too long. Grace flushed. "Don't say anything." Emma smirked. "I wasn't going to say anything. I was just appreciating your effort." Grace rolled her eyes, but her lips curved. The water was cool at first, a relief after the heat of the trail. Grace waded in slowly while Emma dove beneath the surface in one fluid motion and popped up laughing, hair slicked back, and droplets rolling down her collarbone. Grace felt her knees weaken. Emma swam back to her, voice warm. "Okay. Just float." "I don't float." "You will." She moved behind Grace, slid her hands beneath her ribs. "Lean back." "I've got you." Grace tried. Her body tensed immediately. "I don't." Emma pressed her lips to Grace's shoulder again. "Shh, you're safe." Grace let go slowly, breath shaking. Emma's hands held her steady, guiding her through the water, their bodies close. Not tight, just close enough to feel the heat where it mattered. The dip of a waist, the brush of a leg, the gentle grip just below Grace's sternum. "There," Emma whispered. That's it. For a moment, the world shrank to warm water and lazy waves and Emma's mouth barely an inch from Grace's cheek. "You're not so uptight in the ocean," Emma said. "I'm trying to be brave." "You don't have to try." Emma leaned closer. "You already are." Grace turned her head just enough that their mouths hovered, breaths mingling. And then Emma kissed her. Slower than before, softer, with no reason to stop. Grace's hand curled behind Emma's neck, the water slipping between their chests, her lips parting as Emma deepened the kiss. It wasn't rushed. It was deliberate. All mouth, all tongue, the kind of kiss that made Grace's whole body ache. When they broke apart, breathless, Emma said, "You could have drowned, and I wouldn't have noticed." Grace smiled. "Now who's the dramatic one?" Emma's hand drifted down Grace's back under the water. "Still you." Back at the room, they showered separately, but didn't dress immediately. The curtains danced lazily in the breeze. Emma lay on the bed in nothing but a towel, legs crossed, flipping through Grace's notebook like she had every right. "You've got good taste in words," she said without looking up. "You're not supposed to read that." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Too late." Grace sat on the edge of the bed, still damp, still flushed. "You're a menace." Emma reached for her waist. "You like it." Their mouths met again, this time faster. No hesitations. Grace crawled into Emma's lap, towel loosening between them, skin on skin now. The kiss deepened, then slowed again, teasing, with Emma's lips grazing along Grace's jaw, her tongue tracing the shell of her ear. Grace arched into her, gasping when Emma's fingers slipped under the edge of her bikini bottom, not going further, just resting there. A promise. "I like when you let go," Emma whispered. Grace bit her lip. "I don't know what I'm doing." Emma met her eyes. "You don't have to. Just keep doing it with me." Grace pressed her forehead to Emma's, laughing softly. "You're dangerous." "Only to women who overthink." They lay tangled on the bed, the heat pressing close. They didn't go further. Not yet. But hands wandered. Mouths lingered. The kind of touches that knew the edge but didn't cross it. Not because of fear, but because anticipation was delicious. Later, Emma curled against Grace's side and whispered, "You're going to ruin me." Grace traced a lazy finger along her shoulder. "That's a big claim for a girl you barely know." Emma tilted her head to kiss her again, slow, messy, and open-mouthed. "Then let me fix that." They didn't talk about what it meant. Days passed in a blur of salty skin, barefoot walks, and touches that started casual and never ended that way. At night, they shared the same narrow bed, like it was the only safe place left on the island. They hadn't had sex. Not technically, but there were nights when Emma's hand lingered beneath the band of Grace's underwear just long enough to make her breath catch, and Grace's mouth wandered to the soft dip beneath Emma's collarbone, with enough heat to leave her eyes fluttering shut. It wasn't about crossing a line. It was about how close they could get to it without flinching. On Wednesday, the organizers hosted a wine tasting. Grace wore a pale dress that clung to her back in the heat. Emma showed up late, sun-kissed and glowing, with wet hair, a men's button-up shirt left open over her bikini top. People gravitated toward her like she didn't even try. Grace sipped slowly, watched more than she talked. She tried not to feel it. That tightening in her chest when a woman from Berlin placed a hand on Emma's arm and laughed too easily. Emma smiled politely, but didn't step back. Grace looked away. That wasn't part of the deal. She didn't own any of this. But that night when they returned to the room, Emma pulled off her shirt without a word, dropped it on the chair, and stood there in nothing but her bikini bottoms. Her skin was still warm from the sun, her hair still damp. Grace folded her arms. "You had fun tonight." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Are you jealous?" "No," Grace said too quickly. Emma crossed the room in 2 slow steps and stopped in front of her. "If you were, it wouldn't be a crime." Grace swallowed. "Was she your type?" Emma smiled, lazy and maddening. "Not tonight." Before Grace could answer, Emma leaned in, pressing a kiss to the corner of her mouth. Grace gasped as Emma's hands slid around her waist and tugged her closer, bodies flush, breath tangled. Their mouths found each other with the kind of urgency that made Grace dizzy. Open, searching, nothing held back. Emma's fingers found the zipper at the back of Grace's dress and dragged it down, slow, deliberate, the fabric slipping off her shoulders like an invitation. Grace let it fall to the floor. Her whole body lit up under Emma's touch. Fingertips trailing down her spine, up her thighs, lips teasing the curve beneath her jaw. Grace responded with her own rhythm, hands gripping Emma's waist, pulling her in, her mouth hungry and confident now, tasting salt and wine on Emma's tongue. They tumbled into bed, legs tangled, breath coming hard and fast. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. There was a moment where they knocked into the side table and giggled, breathless, before finding each other again. Mouths crashing, hips shifting, fingers tugging fabric aside, but never fully removing it. It didn't matter. Emma pressed her forehead to Grace's as her hand slipped beneath the waistband of her underwear. Finally. Grace gasped, her back arching. Emma moved slowly, watching her face, reading her reactions like a language she already spoke. Grace moaned, soft and bitten off. She felt everything, the pressure, the rhythm, the way Emma's mouth kissed her through it all, her breast, her neck, the place behind her ear that made her thighs shake. Grace clutched the sheets, came apart in quiet, trembling pieces, her breath caught between a curse and Emma's name. Afterward, they lay there, tangled, sweaty, silent. Grace ran a hand through Emma's hair. "I thought you didn't do complications." Emma exhaled against her shoulder. "I don't." "Then what's this?" Emma looked up. "Whatever you want it to be." That wasn't a trick answer, it was an offer. Grace hesitated. Then, "I want it to be real." Emma nodded once. "Okay." The next morning, Grace woke alone. The sheets were cool on Emma's side. Her towel still hung on the chair. Her sandals were missing. Grace sat up slowly, dread inching up her throat. For a moment, it was like the night hadn't happened at all. She got up, pulled on yesterday's dress, and stepped out barefoot into the rising heat. Emma was down the path, standing on a rock near the cove, camera in hand, sun blinding behind her. Grace approached quietly. "You left." Emma glanced back over her shoulder. "I didn't think you'd wake up yet." "That's not the point." Emma lowered the camera. "I needed to breathe." Grace folded her arms. Do you regret last night? Emma turned fully. No. Then what is this? Emma stepped down from the rock, her eyes tired but honest. I don't know how to do this right. That's not a line. It's just the truth. Grace took a step closer. You didn't mess anything up. Emma looked at her for a long moment. You scare me. Why? Because I want this too much, and usually when I want something, it disappears. Grace reached for her hand, held it. Then stay. Emma blinked. That simple? Grace smiled. It can be. The retreat ended 3 days later. Some people exchanged numbers. Others hugged like they'd never see each other again. Emma and Grace packed in silence, brushing past each other, folding clothes with hands that had done much more. When the taxi arrived, Emma held the door open. You coming? She asked. Grace looked up. Where are you going? Emma shrugged. I've got nowhere specific to be. Grace stepped forward and kissed her, right there in front of the cab, under the too bright sun. Not dramatic, not rushed, just real. Emma touched her forehead to Grace's and whispered, So we're doing this? We already are. They climbed in, drove away with the windows down, sea breeze in their hair. 2 women, 1 summer, and no more secrets.